In the humid crucible of the Pacific Theater, Hill 237 was more than a tactical elevation, it was a mystery that devoured men whole. Official maps marked it as just another jungle rise, but to the soldiers who heard the rumors, it was cursed. Patrols sent into the tree-choked ridge vanished without a trace. No gunfire, no radio calls, just silence. When the 4th Unit failed to return, High Command authorized a reconnaissance mission. Raven 6 was assembled, 5 soldiers handpicked for their skill and silence. Captain Wells, a war-hardened leader with steel in his stare, carried the weight of command like armor. With him were Reyes, the sniper who spoke only through her scope. Turner, a fresh-faced radio op whose brother had died months earlier in the same region. Hawthorne, a medic whose composure hid trauma she refused to name, and Kazuki, the flamethrower operator, a Japanese-American caught between 2 loyalties, 2 wars. Their march to Hill 237 was marked by the uncanny. The jungle grew unnaturally quiet as they ascended. No birds, no insects, just the wet squelch of mud and breath. Trees appeared burned in patches without recent fire. They passed abandoned foxholes, snapped rifles, and helmets still perched on rotting logs, too intact for a battlefield, too wrong to be peace. When they reached the crest, they found trenches in perfect condition, gear neatly stacked. Even half-smoked cigarettes balanced on crates like the soldiers had simply vanished mid-thought. No bodies. No signs of a fight. Then, the radio static started. Turner, who had been scanning for enemy chatter, paused. The frequency warped. Through the crackle, a voice whispered his name. And then again. It was unmistakable, his brother's voice, calling from beyond. At first, he thought it a trick. But when he tuned the dial, the whispers persisted. Meanwhile, Hawthorne began waking at night in a sweat, convinced she was suffocating. She said she dreamt of being buried alive, hearing boots over her grave. Her uniform was damp with soil. Reyes spotted movement in the trees, shapes too big for birds, too slow for men. When she looked again, nothing remained. Captain Wells kept the squad tight, pushing discipline, but even he couldn't explain what they were seeing. The hill didn't feel like enemy ground, it felt like it was watching them, remembering them. At 2:37 a.m., all their watches stopped ticking. Every night. No explanation. No warning. When Turner finally cracked and confessed what he heard on the radio, no one laughed. Because by then, they all had their own ghosts whispering through the static. Hill 237 wasn't haunted in the storybook sense. It was haunted by war, by memory, by guilt. And now, it had 5 more names to remember. The jungle around Hill 237 never seemed to wake, even in daylight. Mornings bled into evenings with no birdsong, no rustle of wind. The silence pressed against the squad like a second skin. Captain Wells kept their routine, strict watch rotations, equipment checks, regular patrols, but the rules of combat didn't seem to apply here. The enemy wasn't just unseen, it was unnameable. On their second day, Reyes found a half-buried helmet at the base of a tree, the leather strap intact. But the interior lined with rust-colored streaks that weren't rust. Hawthorne pried a dog tag from the roots. The name matched a corporal declared missing 3 weeks prior, no body, no blood. Just the gear, as if it had been laid there intentionally. They discovered a collapsed trench system, partially hidden beneath vines. Inside was a journal wrapped in oilskin. The entries were clear at first, routine updates, names, rations. Then the handwriting grew erratic. The final pages spoke of comrades who whispered while asleep, of tree lines that moved closer each night, of eyes watching from just beyond the campfire. That night, Turner reported hearing tapping on his radio, too rhythmic to be static, too structured to be natural. He translated the pulses, Morse code. The message was 3 words long. Tell the truth. No one slept. On the 3rd night, Hawthorne screamed in her sleep. She thrashed violently, clawing at her throat. When Wells pinned her down, she gasped. I was under dirt. I couldn't breathe. I saw boots, my boots. Her fingernails were caked with soil. None of them had seen her leave her cot. Kazuki stayed silent through it all, staring into the dark beyond their perimeter. When Reyes pressed him, he simply said, "This place burns different." Later, Reyes watched the jungle through her scope and fired. A figure had stood there motionless. When the squad searched, all they found was her field jacket nailed to a tree. 3 bullet holes in the back. Wells ordered a fallback to the central ridge. As they moved, they passed a tree with dozens of dog tags nailed into its bark. None were tarnished. Some bore the names of men who were supposed to be alive. Turner spotted one with his own name. Their watches all stopped again at 2:37 a.m. That night, the whispering returned, stronger now, not from the radios, but from the roots. From beneath them, from within them. Turner sat awake, staring at nothing. When asked if he was okay, he said, "He's almost here." "Who?" Reyes demanded. Turner's eyes flicked upward, "The one who remembers." Then the ground trembled. Not from shelling, not from storm. From something waking below. And Hill 237 at last began to speak. By the 4th day, on Hill 237, the boundaries between memory and reality had fully collapsed. What little trust remained among the squad unraveled under the pressure of their private horrors. Captain Wells kept them moving, pushing toward what he claimed was a fallback point near the southern ridge. But even he could no longer tell if they were ascending or descending. The jungle had shifted paths, twisted back on themselves, trees reappeared in different locations. And the sun, when visible, seemed fixed in place. Kazuki grew distant. He stopped speaking altogether and began muttering to himself in Japanese fragments of old prayer or battlefield commands. When Hawthorne approached him one night, she found him kneeling in front of a fireless pit, whispering into the soil. "They're still here," he said, barely audible, "burned, but not gone." Turner was the next to break. His radio had begun speaking to him in clear voices, his brother, his mother, even his own childhood self. When the others found him, he'd stripped off his shirt and was carving something into his own forearm, a series of numbers that matched old battlefield coordinates from a napalm drop during the early phase of the campaign. Coordinates for Hill 237. It was then that Kazuki told the truth. Years ago, as a flamethrower trainee, he'd been part of an experimental raid. The mission was classified an attempt to erase a hidden Japanese bunker rumored to house a shrine. Not just soldiers. He pulled the trigger himself, igniting trenches full of voices crying in a language he could not allow himself to understand. He never reported the site, never returned, until now. The hill, he said, remembered everything. The screams, the flame, the betrayal. Reyes, hardened and silent until now, turned on him. Her rifle raised, she demanded to know why he hadn't told them. Why they were dying for secrets. Why their minds were bleeding into the jungle. Wells stopped her, but barely. That night, Turner vanished. His radio remained, still playing a soft lullaby none of them recognized. Raz smashed it underfoot. The song kept playing. And the jungle bled. In the morning, the trail to the summit opened cleared of vines, footprints lining the path. Footprints in military-issue boots. None of them had walked it. Ahead, the hill no longer loomed, it waited. Captain Wells gave the order to move. None of them spoke. And as they stepped forward, the trees closed behind them. Hill 237 was no longer just a battlefield. It was a confession chamber. The path to the summit of Hill 237 was not a trail, it was a descent into memory, layered with fog and ash. As Captain Wells, Reyes, Hawthorne, and Kazuki climbed, the air grew colder, dense with the metallic taste of blood. There were no sounds of birds or bugs, only the low thrum of something ancient, pulsing from the soil like a second heartbeat. At the hilltop, they found the remains of a bunker half swallowed by roots and blackened stone. The entrance was marked by dozens of rusted helmets and rifle stocks twisted into a shrine. Reyes whispered a prayer under her breath. Kazuki didn't cross himself, he only stared. Inside, the tunnel sloped downward into the earth. The walls pulsed with heat, as if the fire that once consumed the place still smoldered beneath. The walls were covered in scorched handprints, hundreds overlapping, etched into the stone like the final gestures of the entombed. In the chamber beyond, they found Turner. He knelt before an altar constructed of bones, dog tags, melted steel, and charred field journals. His eyes were open but distant, like glass filled with stormwater. He was muttering a sequence of names. Names they recognized: fellow soldiers, officers, even a few from their own unit. "The Hill wants to remember," he said. "It wants someone to tell it why." Rhea stepped forward, but the ground shifted. The chamber darkened. Each of them was pulled into their own vision. Wells saw the faces of a dozen Japanese soldiers, ones he had ordered gunned down while waving white flags. He heard their voices, not in anger, but in quiet, bewildered pleading. Reyes relived the moment she shot her commanding officer in the back during a chaotic jungle retreat, blaming the enemy to protect herself and earning a medal for it. Hawthorne found herself kneeling beside a soldier she once left behind, whispering that she'd return, but knowing she wouldn't. His face asked no questions, it simply bled. Kazuki stood inside a trench filled with fire, his own hands turning the valve of his flamethrower as screams echoed. But this time, when he turned around, the flames followed him. One by one they fell to their knees. They confessed. Out loud. To each other. To the Hill. And when the last words were spoken, the altar cracked, the heat vanished. Turner collapsed, his whispers replaced by silence. But the Hill was not done. A voice rose from the earth, not angry, not cruel, only tired. It said, "One must stay." Captain Wells stood first. "This war follows me wherever I go. Maybe it's time I stopped running." He turned to the others. "Finish this. Make it count." He walked to the altar, sat beside Turner's body, and placed his rifle across his knees. The ground sealed behind the three survivors. Reyes wept for the first time. Hawthorne didn't speak. Kazuki lit a flare. The tunnel behind them opened to daylight. The Hill had taken its toll. But for now it was sated. The jungle opened to them slowly, as if Hill 237 had decided to let them go. Hawthorne, Reyes, and Kazuki emerged from the tree line at dawn, filthy, burned, and silent. No one spoke of what they'd seen underground. No one could. The extraction point had been moved. A forward unit found them days later, wandering the edge of a dry riverbed. Only Hawthorne was coherent enough to speak, though her words made little sense. She kept repeating coordinates and the phrase, "It remembers. It always remembers." Back at the forward operating base, they were treated for exhaustion and psychosis. A report was drafted. Captain Wells, missing in action. Turner, deceased by unknown causes. Reyes and Kazuki were deemed unfit for redeployment. Hawthorne was held for observation. She kept a journal, though most of the entries were fragments, names of lost soldiers. Snatches of prayers, sketches of twisted trees and helmet shrines. One drawing depicted a face emerging from the hill's side, half human, half ash. Eyes shut, in grief. On her 7th night at base, the power flickered. A private on guard duty claimed he saw a figure in the mist beyond the fence, helmeted. Shoulders square, rifle across his knees. When they checked, no one was there. But the footprints remained. Weeks later, a new squad was dispatched to investigate Hill 237. They never returned. The brass redacted all records, maps were altered, flights rerouted. But the veterans whispered. They whispered that sometimes, on moonless nights, the jungle lights with ghost fire. That radios tune to static and play lullabies. That the Hill still watches. And beneath its roots, the sins of war keep breathing.